Fortnite Chapter 4 Season 4 Last Resort, the second to last season of the chapter, has arrived, and it brings a lot of new lore in regards to Kado Thorne, time travel, the high stakes club, and a deeper explanation about the eclipse and its meaning. Before Season 3 concluded, we saw Dr. Slone use the explorers to power the apparatus and make it project a star chart that showed us the trajectory of a moon spiraling closer to the island day by day. Slone stated that the glyphs predicted an incoming eclipse, and that this eclipse is the key to helping us escape our enemies for good. Originally, many of us believed that the eclipse would allow us to escape the island, although now it seems that Slone didn't mean the eclipse itself, but rather what it brought with it, which this mural in Rumble Ruins predicted as well. That being the voracious vampire collector, Kado Thorne, and more importantly, his most prized possession, the mysterious time machine. With Slone's focus now shifted on getting her hands on a time machine, she gets in contact with an old friend and asks him to assemble a team of thieves to heist the time machine from the clutches of Kado Thorne to help us both thwart the vampire's ultimate plan and escape the island once and for all. Speaking of vampires, the High Stakes Club received more lore this update, deepening their story and revealing that their biggest idol, Countess Deriku, an ancient vampire, is secretly their greatest enemy who is seeking to prey on the High Stakes Club next. On a side note, two seemingly important artifacts can be found in Kado Thorne's collection at Eclipse Estates. One of those being a cracked stone slab named the Looper's Calendar in the Fortnite game files that may actually explain the backstory of the Seven, and the other being a golden hand that many, including myself, believe that it belongs to the vanished mastermind with the golden touch, Midas, leaving many thinking that he was possibly killed by Kado Thorne, which would in turn explain his absence from the story, which sets the stage for questions such as who is the figure on the ancient mural, how will Slone steal the time machine, what will Slone do with the time machine, what is the Looper's Calendar, what happened to Midas, and who is Countess Deriku. We got quite a bit to cover, so sit back, relax, and let's uncover the secrets buried in the past. Before we begin, I'm sure any new people who may be watching this video may be wondering why I don't have that many questions regarding Kado Thorne. I'd like to first welcome you to my channel, and to answer the question, I already made a video covering who Kado Thorne is, what his ultimate plan is, and how the time machine works. So if any of you are interested in that, make sure to go give that video a watch. So with that being said, let's start off with a summary of both the Nolan Chance and Piper Pace snapshot quests before we get into our questions. The first set of snapshot quests are from Nolan Chance. When we go to interact with him for the first time, he mentions that a mutual friend of ours told him we would be perfect for a heisting gig, that person being none other than Dr. Slone herself. He states that our target is Kado Thorne and his security. Once we get some intel regarding Kado and how high his security measures are, we come across a character named Antonia. Antonia gives us a quick summary of her backstory with Nolan Chance. She claims they used to be partners, co-conspirators, a real 1-2 punch, but everything changed ever since their last heist when Nolan bailed with the driver, leaving Antonia all alone stranded with the bag. She escaped, as she always does, but according to her, Nolan never apologized. So now she wants to get back at him and steal his job from him, asking us if we're down to help. Together with Antonia, we heist Kado Thorne's vault, and at the same time we help Nolan Chance by deploying a scanner in the Eclipse Estates vault. Once we deploy the scanner, we return to Nolan and find out that he knows we spoke with Antonia. Instead of worrying about us talking to Antonia, Nolan is laser focused on the mission he was assigned to by Slone and explains to us what it is right away. Chance tells us that there's something in Kado's deepest and best protected vault that Slone desires. I'm sure as many of you know, that something is the time machine. Nevertheless, Nolan Chance continues by telling us that pulling this heist off will require a crew stacked with the best of the best. Unfortunately, he's burnt a lot of bridges between others and tells us that we need to recruit more new talent, or else he'll have to make a lot of apologetic phone calls, which is something he really doesn't want to do right now. So we're left with no other choice but to try and recruit the usual suspects for the job. The first is Agent Peely. We don't get much from him other than a headshake and a disappointed look for apparently blowing his cover. The second suspect is Arctic Assassin, which is an immediate no. Arctic Assassin is currently trying and struggling to rehabilitate her image, especially with her last name being Assassin, so she declines our offer but wishes us the best of luck on the crime. Last but not least, we come across the cunning Countess Deriku, who also refuses to join the crew because, as we all know, she's a popular star that draws attention, so she wouldn't be able to keep a low profile. With the wish of good luck and a no from all three potential candidates, Nolan Chance is left with no other choice but to rebuild the burnt bridges between his former crew members, starting with Piper Pace. We start off with a short interaction with Piper Pace. case. Piper figures out that we are working with Nolan Chance, and she tells us that she hasn't heard that name in a hot minute, indicating she was the former getaway driver for Chance's previous heists. We learn that she began working at Pizza Pit to start saving up money to become a pro circuit racer, but unfortunately the tips aren't cutting it. So under the conditions that we won't be a liability and can impress her, she agrees to join back Nolan's crew to execute the grand heist. After doing some quests, Piper officially rejoins the crew, but the work is still not quite finished. Antonia is vital for this plan to work, so we are tasked to steal a beautiful ring from Kado Thorne's stronghold in Rumble Ruins for Antonia per Nolan Chance's request. Once that is done, we deliver the ring and a letter of apologies from Nolan to Antonia to convince her to come back to the crew. After some careful thinking and a little bit of teasing of Nolan, Antonia accepts the apology to rejoin the crew for the grand heist. However, she warns Nolan that if he ditches her again, it's over for good. That wraps it up for a summary of the snapshot quest. Therefore, let's begin answering our questions, with the first one being, who is the figure on the ancient mural? Ever since the release of Fortnite Wilds, this mural has been of great discussion amongst the community. A lot of people were split between the mural depicting an image of the cube's cradle and the figure. It turns out that the mural was depicting a figure, and the majority of the community believed that the figure was Kado Thorne himself in his Revenant form. This is a somewhat convincing theory, considering the similarities between Kado's Revenant form and the mural, like the ear shape, the dark cloak, and the moon and sun representing the eclipse. However, some of the proportions just don't match Kado at all, especially the head shape. Then again, these murals were made by the ancients, although that excuse seems implausible, bearing in mind that the Transformers mural and the apparatus mural were both accurate. For now, I'm undecided whether the mural represents Kado Thorne, so hopefully we'll get some confirmation sometime in the near future. Nonetheless, the next question on deck is, how will Dr. Slone steal the time machine? We need to all realize that the time machine is a giant object, and there must be some specific controls to get it to work properly as well. Without the proper equipment, the time machine may malfunction and possibly make things worse for both Slone and the island. Not only will the crew have to carefully extract the time machine, they'll also need to figure out what to do with Kado Thorne, since the time machine is his most prized possession, and he's a vampire, so the crew certainly got their work cut out for them. I theorize that one of two things could happen. The band of thieves will either somehow defeat Kado Thorne and steal his time machine, or while Kado is away time traveling, in the few moments the thieves have, they'll steal the time machine, leaving the vampire lost in time with no way to get back. This would be an absolutely perfect scenario for Slone. She'll kill two birds with one stone. The time machine will finally be in her hands, and she won't have to worry about that pesky vampire anymore. Though I think the first options of the thieves defeating Kado is more likely, considering part 4 of the snapshot quest, we'll have to defeat Kado Thorne or his guards to get time machine batteries. So it may be possible that the crew first steals the time machine and then gets the batteries for Slone to power the device, or they will fail in getting the time machine, leaving Slone with no other option but to build her own time machine and use Kado Thorne's time machine batteries to power her own device. Following up the last question, our next question is, what will Slone do with the time machine? Now this question is a bit more tricky. We're not entirely sure what Slone intends to do with the time machine, other than her mentioning last season that she has a plan that will help us both escape our enemies and the island for good. We also have the information from leakers that season 5 will only last 1 month. So what could this mean? This could mean many things, and there's many periods of time in which Slone could go back to. One popular theory amongst the community was that Slone would go back in time to the collision event and avert the Seven's victory against the Imagined Order to prevent the inevitable downward spiral of setting the 0 point free. While it would be awesome for that to happen, it seems unlikely due to Slone officially parting her ways with the Imagined Order and no longer having any interest in working for them anymore. I personally theorize that no matter what Slone does, something will go wrong, because inevitably that will lead to season 5, which is only 1 month, which then leads into the first and final event of the chapter 4 finale. I think Slone will possibly attempt to go far into the future or so far back into the past that the time machine will malfunction and explode, similarly to the Rift Gate, which would create some sort of time paradox on the island or the entire Omniverse. That'll be so confusing, it'll fry all our brains. But all jokes aside, I just genuinely see that happening for now, because I seriously can't picture any other scenarios of what else would happen with this time machine and how it'll lead us into a 1 month long season and a highly anticipated live event. Only time will tell. Speaking of time though, a mysterious and unfamiliar relic from the past was found in Kado's vault, which leads us into our next question. What is the Looper's Calendar? One of the objects located in Kado Thorne's collection that can be found in Eclipse Estates is the Looper's Calendar. The very existence of this artifact has left many people stumped about its purpose and what the symbols are attempting to represent. One thing is clear, it's a calendar of sorts, likely made by the Loopers to track time, and the Seven have something to do with it. This stolen relic may also explain the backstory of the Seven. On the fractured rock, you can see 5 familiar symbols, one belonging to the Paradigm, the Scientist, the Visitor, the Origin, and the Foundation. But I'm sure, as many of you just noticed, the Sisters are missing. This may be suggesting that the Sisters were actually the last 2 members to join the Seven, further indicating that the Seven have been around for uncounted centuries. However, the 7 being included in the Looper's calendar is somewhat confusing, so let's attempt to break it down. One of the first things you can see on the calendar is a crown. Many people have theorized that the crown represents the 0 point or possibly Geno. Although contrary to popular belief, I think the crown in the middle of the calendar actually represents a victory royale / escaping the loop, since only by being the last player standing and located in the exact eye of the storm are loopers able to escape the loop. Escaping the loop is what allows the loopers to live on the island, retain their memories on the island, and to be able to speak with one another. This theory would also make a lot of sense since the calendar is called the Looper's calendar, and because the crown is located in the exact middle of the calendar. Now let's take a look at what's outside of the crown. We can obviously tell that there are multiple figures surrounding that crown. I believe that the carvings of those figures are meant to represent the loopers fighting one another while trapped in the loop, fighting till the death until there was one last standing. Apart from those figures, we can also see 3 circles. This one is quite confusing, but I think it may be representing the final storm circles that are not in the exact center of the storm. And like I mentioned earlier, if a looper gets a victory royale in the exact center of the storm, they escape the loop. But if they win and it's not in the eye of the storm, they repeat the same 22-minute loop again. As many people in the community have pointed out, if you zoom out a bit and compare the stone tablets side by side next to a picture of the vault from chapter 1 season 8, you'll notice some similarities between them. At first glance, this may seem like a plausible theory. We have the 5 symbols and then the circle in the middle, but if you take a closer look and really start comparing the two, they seem less and less alike. First, let's start off with the most obvious difference, that being the symbols. The vault had 5 distinct symbols, and they are very much different from the 5 symbols of the 7 shown on the calendar. I personally believe that if this calendar had anything to do with the vault, then we would have seen the vault's symbols, not the 7's. Secondly, the centers don't match up. The vault had a closed hatch, and the inside of the vault were vaulted weapons and the 0 point. The Looper's calendar, on the other hand, shows figures running and fighting each other with the crown in the middle, which doesn't seem to match up with what's inside the vault. Lastly, from what we know, the vault has nothing to do with time because it was only used to store vaulted items and contain the 0 point in it. You're allowed to draw your own conclusions, but I just really don't think it's the vault that is being depicted here. Although what I do think that is being depicted here may be either the loop's barrier or the storm, since it's surrounding the loopers and the crown but not the 7 because they're outside the loop. I'm genuinely unsure why the 7's insignias are carved in the looper's calendar, though my best guess is that it has something to do with the 7 having close ties with the looper. The final thing to break down the looper's calendar are the glyphs. After carefully examining the glyphs written in the calendar, I think it's safe to say that they are the same glyphs that belong to the ancients, meaning the loopers may actually not have carved this calendar. I have a few theories about this. It could be that the ancients may have either observed the island, the loopers, and the 7, which is why they created this calendar, or the more likely possibility in my mind is that this calendar is a prediction, similarly to the Mayan calendar that predicted many things as well. Instead though, the looper's calendar was a prediction of the loop and the 7 made by the ancients. However, this theory has its flaws, such as how did the ancients predict the 7's insignias? Despite that, what I think I'm sure about is the answer to our next question, that being, what happened to Midas? Midas is one of, if not the biggest controversy in the Fortnite storyline community, and after a golden severed hand was found in Kado Thorne's collection, rumors about his return began to spread again. Some people strongly believe Midas's return is imminent, and others think he won't be coming back for a while. I myself, even though I'm a huge Midas fan, believe Midas won't be coming back for some time, at least not until chapter 4 is over. We know that without a doubt that this golden hand is Midas's hand due to the texture's codename of the object being named Midas hand. So let's not waste any more time and answer the big question. Is Midas dead? Midas is certainly not dead. He's a very important character that can help further explain the imagined order and the loop. But then if Midas isn't dead, who would the hand belong to? The severed golden hand would still belong to Midas. However, I theorize that it doesn't belong to the original Midas. It belongs to his snapshot. As we saw in the chapter 2 season 3 trailer, Midas was believed to have died. A bit later on though, it was confirmed by Donald Mustard that it was just a snapshot that the shark had eaten.
Midas is great and not dead.
Hence, the possibility of Kado Thorne cutting off a Midas snapshot's hand is more likely. Although if the hand did belong to the original Midas, Midas is probably fine and got a prosthetic hand, which is very common to get in a franchise like Star Wars. Even so, we may not see him for a bit, considering we now have a new CCO. Hopefully I'm wrong though, I myself and many others have been anticipating his return for quite some time. Leaving us with our final question, who is Countess Deriku? According to her NPC description, the Countess is an ancient vampire with a thirst for fame, and her next target is the High Stakes Club, her biggest fans. On stage, the international rock star's name is Starfang, and you may all recognize her from the front cover of the High Stakes Club music pack. But in reality, she's a deceitful and cunning monster preying on her fans. In the recent update, the High Stakes Club returned, but this time in formal attire. Joni the Red, now Joni the Scarlet, shockingly discovers that her idol, Starfang, is a vampire that planned to feast on the High Stakes Club next, which infuriated Joni. Joni, now heartbroken and fueled by vengeance, is asking her closest friends, Halsey and Lucian West, to join her in slaying the Countess. Even though though it seems like they would get together right away and just get the job done, that doesn't seem to be the case. The news that their idol is a vampire and discovering that she wanted to feast on the high stakes club has left the group in disarray. As if this wasn't enough already, in NPC dialogue, Countess Deriku is both teasing and manipulating the club, most likely to stall them as long as possible, create chaos between the group members, and then strike when they are almost vulnerable. What do you guys think? Will the club reunite and defeat the Countess, or will she get the better of them, or at least one of them, and destroy the club forever? Subscribe if you love Fortnite storyline content, a like is appreciated, and consider using my code Rezztro in the item shop. Thank you all for watching, and see you guys in the next one. Take care.